Okay. To my speakers who I can see, can you guys see my screen with the presentation? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, so the first speaker that we have tonight is Denali. Denali is the co-director of the Power Coalition. They live in Roanoke, Virginia, and they are originally from Southern Maine, and their family is from Southern India. They're passionate about climate action and uplifting the voices of communities most impacted by environmental racism and the climate crisis through their communications work. So Denali, go ahead and begin and just let me know when you want me to switch slides.
Thank you so much, Xiomara. It's great to be with you all. I I'm fresh off the plane in Southern California for the first time of my life, on the stolen lands of the Kumeyaay people. I usually live on the stolen lands of the Monacan people, and that's now called, or is so called, Roanoke, Virginia. And I'm really pleased to be with you all to share a bit about what the Mountain Valley Pipeline is, why we're focusing on the financiers behind the MVP like Vanguard, and how y'all can get involved. And then I'm really excited to pass the mic after I speak to Kelly Ferguson to talk about how Vanguard is endangering her kids' future directly by funding and backing the MVP. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give a quick um, overview of what the Mountain Valley Pipeline and Mountain Valley Pipeline Southgate Extension are for any folks who don't know yet. So the MVP is a 303-mile frac gas pipeline. It's 42 inches in diameter, which makes it a large diameter pipeline. And the MVP has proposed its Southgate extension, which would run 31 miles into North Carolina. The mainline MVP runs more than half of it through West Virginia and then through Southwest Virginia as well. And it's really important to note that the MVP goes over some of the steepest slopes in the nation, and no pipeline has ever been attempted to be built across such steep slopes that are landslide prone and go across seismic zones. And ever since Senator Joe Manchin and Congress fast-tracked the pipeline in the summer of last year, we have already been seeing landslides happen on the route, including one in Giles County recently, and we've seen really extreme water pollution episodes, including in Sinking Creek in Giles County and in West Virginia, where folks have had to drink bottled water because they haven't been able to drink their own water. The pipeline fight has been happening since 2014 when the MVP was first proposed, which was during the fracking boom in Appalachia. And MVP thought that they would get the pipeline done in a few years, so they came out very rushed and reckless, as they always do. But because of their recklessness, they've been caught up in legal challenges for what's now almost a decade. And so a lot of those pipes have also been sitting out in the sun and corroding, which is a big safety concern given what I mentioned about the landslide prone territory and the seismic zones that the pipes cross. Because we've spoken to many experts that have shared um, really alarming educated guesses about what could happen if there was an explosion, to specifically to the communities that live in the blast zone and the evacuation zone. And then also, of course, we are thinking about the endangered species like you see on the screen, the Roanoke log perch, which is the biggest darter, I believe, in the darter family. It's called the king of darters. It's a very endangered and beloved fish that is really sensitive to sediment shifts in the streams it runs through. It's very used to pristine, beautiful streams like Sinking Creek, where Kelly lives near, that have been exposed to devastating pollution levels. And it's important to note that even after the pollution is less visible, after the several weeks that in this case MVP took to address the pollution incident, the impacts are still really devastating to fish populations and to the ecosystems in the streams. Um, I also just wanted to speak to the other graphic on that slide, which is a piece of art made by Salty Whistler, who's an Appalachian artist who works with Mergoat magazine. And this art was made in response to a recent paper by Dr. Shannon Bell, who's at Virginia Tech. And the paper looks at the mental and physical health impacts of living near proposed fracked gas infrastructure sites. And so another really devastating impact of both MVP and the Southgate extension is the mental and physical toll this infrastructure, even the proposal of this infrastructure, has on the community. And we saw with a recent shift in the project plan with MVP Southgate, where the project was supposed to run 72 miles into communities in Rockingham and Alamance County, and then suddenly they changed the plan and it's going into different communities. The way these fossil fuel companies like EQT and Equitrans and MVP use communities as placeholders for the projects that they just want to make money off of, that we have proven don't have any other positive impacts. They use the communities as placeholders, and that has a real physical and mental toll on the community, whether the infrastructure ultimately ends up going through their communities or not. So I'm sure Kelly and Dr. Crystal will add to that overview, but for now we can go to the next slide, please. I wanted to give a little bit of information about the Power Coalition, which is the coalition I co-direct with my co-director, Russell Chisholm, who's in the first picture with his dog, Murphy. That's the picture to the top left of these 4 pictures. And all of these beautiful photos were taken by Matthew Pickett, who is an impacted community member of the MVP. The Power Coalition began when community members and landowners started hearing that a pipeline was going to come through their land and community, and they started attending MVP's like community engagement sessions or town halls, and really coming up against a lot of stonewalling and a lack of information and misinformation that for some community members, they were already against the pipeline, but for others, it really made folks very skeptical, if not opposed to the pipeline. And so these smaller groups of community members started coming together to oppose the pipeline. And then folks thought they would all be more powerful together in a coalition of grassroots groups, and the Power Coalition came together. I think most of these folks have been in the fight that are on the screen since the beginning, and they're all directly impacted by the pipeline. And over the past almost a decade of the pipeline fight, the Power Coalition has gone through a lot of growth from being a coalition that was really focused on eminent domain and landowner rights, to a coalition that recognizes that community members at large are significantly impacted by the pipeline, that the pipeline runs through stolen Monacan and Yesa land, and that the pipeline, its climate impacts will impact many more communities than are just directly on the Mountain Valley Pipeline route. And so gradually over the past 10 years, the coalition's grown to be a lot bigger, to the point that we organized a two huge events to Manchin's proposed dirty deal in Washington, D.C. with speakers like Dr. Crystal and and Maury Johnson, who's on the screen in the bottom right and is an impacted landowner in West Virginia. And we were able to defeat Manchin's power, I think 4 times before he got the president and Congress to fast track the pipeline. So that's a bit about the Power Coalition. And we can go to the next slide, please. I wanted to give a brief history of MVP's timeline because 10 years is a really long time. Of course, I'm going to miss a lot here, and Dr. Crystal and Kelly will bring up other moments, I think, in the timeline of the MVP as they speak. The MVP was first proposed in October of 2014. And then they began the process of trying to get all their permits that they needed in order to start construction in 2018. And in September of 2018, what folks refer to as the longest tree set in US history began. The yellowfinch tree sit ran 900 plus days in the forests and slopes that were impacted by the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And then I just want to say that direct action resistance to the pipeline has been a massive reason why we've been able to have sustained legal challenges and really interrogate the lack of need for the pipeline and their recklessness in our communities and mountains. And then in October 2019, the federal government, FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, stopped most of construction on the route. And so that took us to 2022 when Manchin began his 4 to 5 attempts to greenlight the MVP with because he wanted to silence all the thousands of people who were opposing the pipeline and just get it done so that he and other CEOs could make more and more money off of that successful victory. And then in June of 2023, Manchin and Congress restarted construction. And throughout this entire timeline, there's been really beautiful and sustained, artful and strategic resistance by communities throughout West Virginia, and North Carolina to both the MVP and the MVP Southgate. And that will bring us to the next slide. So I mentioned a few of the incidents that you can see on this slide, but just to describe the images you're seeing of what construction has been like since the MVP started construction last summer. You can see in the top left, there's an image of a light green pipe in a puddle of water that's polluted by sediment. And there's some tape on the pipeline, which can show you how MVP is very, very reckless when it comes to community safety. And they really don't care about taking care of their pipes in order to take care of the community. And then the other two photos are images of sinking creek that has been really devastatingly polluted by the pipeline. And we've seen regulatory agencies turn away from recognizing their job to intervene in this devastating pollution. Prior to these images being taken, the creeks ran beautifully clear, and you'll hear more from Kelly about the cultural significance of these creeks. And then something that's not pictured on these slides, but Power has been posting about is also the damages to the land and the massive cracks in the land that MVP has been creating by construction. And we saw recently the MVP further increased its cost of the project to almost 8 billion. The pipeline was estimated to be closer to 3 billion initially, and they've just increased it since. And then the project is also going to be delayed. They say until second quarter of this year, but they just reported to FERC that they're only about 65% complete. So no one's holding their breath for them to follow through on that second quarter of this year claim, especially given that they're almost 6 years delayed now. Next slide, please. So I just gave a lot of information, and you're going to hear some more really compelling comments from Dr. Crystal and Kelly, but I wanted to just add to that information that one thing we're really focused on, including with this Vanguard campaign, is bringing our artful and strategic resistance to the MVP to the financial sector and pressuring these financiers of the Mountain Valley Pipeline and also of climate chaos at large to stop backing these disastrous projects, both because they are devastating to our communities and our ecosystems, but also because they're really high risk investments that they shouldn't be putting people's retirement savings and life savings into. And we believe that they are very misguided in doing so. So on the screen, you can see some beautiful art that we've created to the left with paper hand puppet intervention out of Saxapahaw in North Carolina. These are possum masks that we've been creating for our finance campaign, given that the possums are both a very beloved animal and also an animal that people might find annoying. And so holding that dichotomy in the fierceness of our resistance to the banks, which can often feel very daunting, but the possum teaches us to just keep doing our thing and keep being tenacious. And then on the right side, you can see, and I hope I'm doing my left and right. I think I am. You can see an amazing print by Jan Berger, who's one of the founders of Paper Hand. And on the print is the candy darter, which is like the Roanoke log perch, a very endangered creature that is impacted by the MVP. The darter is a really, really tiny fish that is sometimes called the underwater rainbow, and it's been a very beloved fish in our fight for a long time. And so we're using our connection to critters and the environment and art to strategically and joyfully rally against these financiers. And we would love to have your support, if you can show up at a rally, if you can show up at these webinars, if you can donate funds to groups like 7 Directions of Service and Power. There are a myriad of ways to get connected. And with that, I want to pass back to Xiomara. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Denali. I appreciate the way that you succinctly managed to share with us like a decade worth of work and resistance. Very digestible way. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. Our next presenter that is going to talk to us is Dr. Crystal Cavalier. Dr. Crystal is a citizen of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation and is an adjunct professor in the Social Sciences Department at Salem College in Winston-Salem. Crystal has dedicated the past 5+ years to defending her homelands against the Mountain Valley Pipeline and Southgate Extension. She's leading a campaign to bring the rights of nature laws to North Carolina to protect the waterways and communities in the pipeline's path. Crystal is the CEO and co-founder of the 7 Directions of Service with her husband. And Crystal completed her doctorate at the University of Dayton, focusing on the social justice crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, which is tied to gas and oil pipelines. This led her to launch the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Coalition of North Carolina. Dr. Crystal is currently in the 2024 Tribal Professional Cohort at the Native Nations Institute at the University of Arizona and working towards her Master's of Professional Studies in the Indigenous Governance Program. And I will pass it to you, Dr. Crystal.
Thank you so much, Samara. And I'm so honored to be here and be alongside with Denali and Kelly, these fighters, upholding Mother Earth. So I'm just going to briefly talk about this fight here on the MVP Southgate. So you can go to the next slide if you want to. We all have a right to clean air. The harmful excesses of the fossil fuel industry are denying safe drinking water and are in the process of murdering our lands before our eyes. So you can see right here, this is part of the pipeline that is going through our mountains in Virginia, which Denali already mentioned. It was very steep mountains. And they're actually blowing the mountaintops off, going through them, going under our sacred rivers. And I've been working hard learning about the rights of Indigenous peoples with the United Nations and the implications of hazardous substances and waste throughout the chemical life cycle. And regarding our environmental human rights crisis in West Virginia, North Carolina, involving persuasive human exposure to toxic chemicals and fossil fuels. There are many watersheds in West Virginia, in North Carolina, and Virginia. More than 1 million plus residents who are directly impacted and indirectly impacted will have been chronically exposed to benzene, butyl-cyclohexane, ethylbenzene, styrene, and toluene, all known carcinogens known to cause cancer. MVP and potentially the Southgate pipelines, and I say potentially is because we are working hard to keep the Southgate out of North Carolina. They will run through lakes, especially the Southgate, but mainline will run through lakes, bore under rivers, aquifers, springs, and other waterways, endangering the ecosystems and communities and fueling the climate crisis. When an aging pipeline fails, like Denali mentioned, because they sit out, getting corroded, getting weathered on, the toxic fallout creates serious health risk for residents and cleanup workers. The public health risk of pipelines run even more profound for tribal communities. Soil and water contamination from methane gas explosions and methane leaks endanger the food security of Indigenous people like mine, who depend on the natural resources where we live for our basic needs and nutrition. Beyond the physical health harms, methane gas leaks can be a significant source of stress-related illness, as communities may experience long-term, if not permanent, disruption to our livelihoods. Man-made items like pipes or other items not found in nature that are being placed in the ground and the disruption of topsoil tend to create more condensed matter that contains nutrients and organic organisms from decomposition from the surrounding lands, which will run into ponds and pooling waters. This disruption leads to the sediment of foreign items, which will kill the fish or cause decay, and even even these gas leaks will leak underwater, rivers and streams, which can deaden our ecosystems and have severe fish kills. The signs of a struggling death for the frac gas industry, as you all heard today, was an announcement being made that EQ2 and Equitrans want to merge. And when we look at these pipeline, when we look at I can't even think, I'm so upset about this transition, but when we look at these people who sit in these positions of power, they all have the same and similar backgrounds. For example, Toby Rice, he has had the same background working in Appalachia doing frac gas for years. We're seeing a monopoly in the fracking industry with mergers and deals at the hands of the American people. Jonathan Cohen, an executive chairman of the current version of Atlas, and Daniel Hertz, president, are potential board nominees for this new merger. He is also working with Edward Cohen, Jonathan's father, who led the original Atlas. All three have bought EQ2 shares. So you can see this is a monopoly and they keep paying each other. You can go to the next slide. So here is one of our sacred burial mounds that the MVP has constantly called rock piles. And these burial mounds are on top of the mountains because that is where most of our ancestors have been placed. And these burial mounds contain hundreds of bones. I'm a former tribal councilwoman from the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation, and I resigned to fight for my people in 2018. my family, and community. My husband and I created an organization called Seven Directions of Service. So our people have lived in West Virginia, Virginia, and North Carolina since time immemorial. We have experienced the worst colonization tactics since the English landed in the 1400s on the coast of Virginia. Not only were our tribes decimated by the illnesses, but there was hundreds of human rights crises happening in the 1400s up until today. We're still experiencing this human rights crisis. As the westward expansion happened, governments and corporations have used different tactics that had crafted the skill on our people first on the East Coast and perfected it moving west. And now we are back here on the East Coast defending our lands again from these pipelines and these companies who want to fund pipelines. So I didn't have much written on these slides because I really wanted you guys to see the effects of what is happening. And I've always wanted to understand, how can I debate people about the pipeline? So I recently read a book by Arthur Schopenhauer. He's a German writer. It's called The Art of Being Right. And there was a quote that stuck out with me. A last trick is to become personal, insulting, rude, and as you perceive that your opponent has the upper hand and that you're going to come off as the worst, it consists in passing from the subject of dispute as from a lost game to the disputant himself, and in some way attacking this person, found that such a detailed and minute consideration of the crooked ways and tricks that are used by common human nature to cover up its shortcomings and is no longer suited to my temperament. And so I lay it aside. And that is what we are experiencing now here on the East Coast in West Virginia, Virginia, and North Carolina, where our land defenders and water protectors are coming under attack. You can go to the next slide. So although MVP constantly states that the project is substantially complete, it is not. In a report in January, it was only 63% complete. We still have time to fight this. It was requesting more time from FERC. They said they needed more time to complete this entire pipeline. And I tell you what, FERC keeps giving them more time. And we have to stand up and we have to stop. Since FERC issued the MVP a certificate in 2017, much evidence has emerged showing that this pipeline is not needed. Falling renewable energy prices, a growing body of evidence that the developers overstated the demand for gas, and upgrades to existing infrastructure show that increased available capacity substantiates the lack of market need for the MVP. So you can see, tying back to this merger that was just announced, they are running out of money, and we need to have people like you to stop it. For example, instead of increasing, as Mountain Valley predicted, the gas demand in the markets to be served by the pipeline is flat or declining in the long term. States such as Virginia and North Carolina have adopted new clean energy policies, leading utilities to scrap plans for new gas-fired power plants. And MVP's leading anchor shipper, EQT, has publicly stated that it no longer had a need for the pipeline's capacity. However, in the last few months, Duke Energy, which is a utility monopoly giant, has stated that they would like to create an LNG gas-fired facility, hence making a true revelation. But they just, I swear, I believe it's backdoor deals. So in February, right before our water walk, we wrote a letter to the United Nations, to the several special rapporteurs. Two of them, one for the rapporteur for toxins and the other one for indigenous people. We asked that the United Nations come out and view the damages to water bodies, destruction of our sacred burial mounds and graves, and look at the harm that it's doing in the community. Next slide. So finally, as I end my presentation, this is a picture of our corn. It is the Tutelo corn. This is the corn that was used by my people. We are working hard to get this corn classified as endangered, in order to protect it. And I want to tell you about a couple of wins because hope is not lost. We won with the Virginia Air Pollution Control Board. They rejected an air permit for the proposed Lambert compressor station designed to propel gas into North Carolina via MVP's proposed Southgate extension. This signaled a huge environmental justice victory. Again, North Carolina's Department of Environmental Quality denied the MVP Southgate a 401 water quality certification 2 separate times on the grounds that it did not meet water quality requirements. And also, Assistant Secretary for DEQ also wrote in 2018 that this pipeline was not needed. But in December of 2023, we got word that the MVP Southgate had been rerouted out of Alamance County. However, they are now routing it through 2 other counties. So I really want to thank you so much for allowing me to come and speak on this platform. And this will conclude my talk about Indigenous people and our communities and how we're affected. And so we here at Seven Directions are working hard to bring unity and educate all communities to help understand how all of our severed connections to the land and the natural world affects us. So organizations like Power and Mine, we really need funding in order to fight these pipelines that are popping up in our area. So thank you so much, Xiomara, and I'm gonna turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Crystal. I appreciate everything that you shared. It's always important for us to hear about the way that Indigenous communities are resisting alongside frontline communities and know that there are nuances within that including sacred sites and the history of the land that is, there's the resistance overall, but then there's also these critical pieces that sometimes fall through the cracks and they can't be allowed to fall through the cracks because they're so, so very important. So I'm really thankful that you were able to be here tonight and to share with us in the midst of allergies. Thank you so much. I'm so thankful. I'm going to move us on to our next speaker, who is Kelly Ferguson. Kelly Ferguson is a resident of Giles County, got it, Virginia, who is directly impacted by the Mountain Valley Pipeline. She is a single mother of 4 young children, and she's a community organizer with the Power Coalition. Kelly, it's all yours.
Thank you for that intro. Hi, everyone. My name's Kelly. I live in Giles County, Virginia, on stolen Monacan and Tutelo land. I'm a community organizer with the Power Coalition, but my most important job is as a mom. I am a single mom raising my children along the route of Mountain Valley Pipeline. As much as I want to protect my children from all of the harm and evil in the world, that becomes very hard when an extractive fossil fuel industry decides they want to build in your backyard. The amount of grief and rage that I've felt the last few months has been immense because of the destruction that has been caused in just the last few months in my county alone. And I know that it's not just me. All of the counties along this route have also experienced the same things that I've experienced. And I know for myself, what I've witnessed is enough to keep me up at night. And when you think about, that's happening in all of these counties in West Virginia and Virginia, it's overwhelming, the amount of destruction that has happened since the summer of 2023. So just a brief overview of a couple of the incidents that have happened here in my county since June 2023. During drilling under the road in Newport, Virginia, which is in Giles, MVP breached karst, which caused a major sedimentation incident that dumped so much sedimentation into Sinking Creek, and actually has caused multiple residents in the area to no longer have drinking water. We're unsure if that will be permanent or not. Hopefully not, but I don't have high hopes for that, unfortunately. So it took MVP over a week, over 10 days after this incident, when there were landowners with affected water, before they even pretended to try to fix what was happening or take any accountability for the damage that they caused. The harm to Sinking Creek is likely irreparable. Also, and it's so sad because the 3 incidents that I'm going to talk about all happen within a 5 to 10 mile radius. So you're talking about it is all very much in one area, and very much poor frontline community members who are the ones that will have to deal with this destruction. Another incident that happened during drilling in a second location, also in Giles, was they had during the drilling, there was a hole in Sinking Creek that opened up, and they plugged that with bentonite clay so that they could continue the bore. Once they start the bore, it has to run 24/7 until it's all the way through. So reckless construction practice, cover it with a Band-Aid, is basically what happened. In the same area, the most recent incident, there was a fairly major landslide in Giles County, right where the pipe is going through. And I really thought, okay, this is the time. This is the time. They're going to stop construction. They're going to stop being reckless. They're going to, try to do something that fixes this long term. Instead, the next time I went by, they were punching rebar into the side of this mountain and gluing the mountain back together with cement. And they've already filled the pipe over with dirt. And, I don't know about everyone else on this call, but that doesn't seem like a very great long-term solution to me. So that's just a little taste of some of the reckless behavior and reckless practices that we've seen happen just in the last few months. As much as I would like to blame just Mountain Valley Pipeline or just Equitrans, the truth is there are so many accomplices to these crimes. Asset managers like Vanguard, BlackRock, and others. These asset managers are making poor financial decisions with individuals, real people's savings, retirement savings, their investments, and it's all to help support unnecessary extractive industry like Mountain Valley Pipeline. I'm fighting every day against this pipeline for my kids' futures, for my community's future. And I can't let this complicity by asset managers go unnoticed, because if I'm not going to speak up for my kids and my community, who is? Asset managers must make better financial decisions for their investors, for these individuals, but also for future generations and all of our frontline communities. And that's all I have, guys.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for sharing with us. I think it's so important that we value those frontline voices, because sometimes they can get lost in the shuffle too, when there's lots of articles that come out, and it's all very like cut and dried sometimes. And so rehumanizing what's happening and reminding folks that there's human beings that are being impacted at the very core of these destructive projects. And so even to institutions like banks and asset managers like Vanguard being able to rehumanize to them and say all of these making that you're doing for the investments on behalf of your clients are having a human impact. You're impacting human beings. And there are stories behind every single one of those human beings. So it's not as easy and cold as the finance world. There's human beings that are being touched by every decision that they make. And I really value the fact that you're able to come and share your story and write about what's happening and help rehumanize what the Mountain Valley Pipeline actually really is doing. I appreciate you taking some time out of your evening to share with us. Thank you so much. I'm going to go on to our next speaker, Jessie Waxman. Jessie is a senior campaign strategist in the fossil-free finance campaign, where she focuses on investors, including asset managers, investors, and financial regulation. Prior to joining the Sierra Club, she served in the staff and/or advisory roles for Green Century Capital Management, Majority Action, and Principles for Responsible Investment. She has extensive experience in both shareholder advocacy and corporate campaigning, and has helped secure environmental commitments from multi-billion-dollar corporations, spearhead sovereign engagement, and mobilize hundreds of grassroots activists and trillions of dollars to advance environmental and climate protections. She lives in Boston, and you can follow Jessie on Twitter at Jessie with a Y, Waxman. And I'm going to let her start speaking. Go ahead, Jessie, it's all yours. And just let me know when you want me to change the slide, okay?
Brilliant. Hi all, thanks so much for being here tonight. To the panelists that came before me, thank you so much both for sharing your stories and for the incredible work that you're doing to fight this extractive and really unnecessary pipeline in the fossil fuel industry. So thank you for all of the work that you're doing. I'm here to talk a little bit about the finance side and tying in a little bit about a recent Sierra Club report where we were diving into the ways that asset managers are helping to fund fossil fuel extraction and fossil fuel expansion. Can we go to the next slide, please? Lovely report title right here. We'll go to the next slide as well. So we're going to do a little bit of a 101. What are asset managers? Why do they matter? What is their role in all of this? So asset managers are some of the biggest financial institutions on Wall Street. Just a handful of them, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, JP Morgan Asset Management, Invesco, collectively control more money than the entire US GDP. We're talking like $25 trillion. So these are huge financial institutions that have a huge amount of power because of the amount of money that they have. Where they decide to put that money has real impacts in the real economy, right? If they are going to invest in climate solutions, we're going to see growth in climate solutions. If they're investing in fossil fuel industries, unfortunately, that means we're seeing more extraction. So asset managers and where they put their money is something that we need to be paying attention to. But asset managers aren't the folks who own the money. They are handling the investments and retirement savings for individuals, for pension funds, for usually public employees, foundations, retirement accounts. While there are a handful of them, a lot of these end up being consolidated in really just the hands of a few asset managers, Vanguard being one of them. And so this is a case of these institutions using our money, our savings, to fund projects that none of us want. And we got to do something about that. Next slide. So there are a bunch of different vehicles that asset managers can invest in. When we talk about corporate ownership and engaging with public companies, there are two big ones. One is going to be shares, so stocks, things that you're buying in the stock market or on the stock market, and bonds, which can also be traded in the stock market. So maybe not a useful distinction there. A share is a unit of ownership in a company. These are things that grant the holders certain rights in corporate governance. If you're familiar with proxy voting at all, that owning shares is an avenue to allow you to engage in corporate governance in those ways. But most of the time, shares are traded on something called the secondary market. So this would be like Xiomara may have bought a share from, I really should have thought of an example of a great company you would buy a share from. Company A. So Xiomara's purchasing of a share from Company A is giving money to Company A, but then maybe Xiomara wants to sell her shares. So I'm going to buy those from Xiomara. That's buying on the secondary market. And so my purchasing of that share doesn't give money to the company directly. Bonds, a lot more often, are going to be newly issued by a company as a way to raise money. And it's a vehicle that companies, particularly fossil fuel companies, are increasingly turning to as a way to raise new capital, new money to finance their existing operations, but also fossil fuel expansion. And they can do quite a lot of business in that, can raise billions of dollars in one issuance. And these will be things that asset managers are going to use our money to buy. Next slide. So like I said, bonds and the purchase of bonds is a direct flow of money from asset managers, from our savings to these companies. And as you can see here, bond financing has become increasingly important. So we know that banks play a big role in fossil fuel financing, right? Fossil fuel companies will come to a bank, ask for a lot of money that they then have to pay back with interest. Bonds work the same way, but instead of going to one or a handful of banks, a company is going to go to hundreds or thousands of investors to raise that money. And that's increasingly where they've been turning to. So this seems to be the direction of the fossil fuel industry, and so important that we cut this off before it becomes an even bigger problem. So one of the things that we really need to be doing is, if we want to stop fossil fuel expansion, we have to get investors and big asset managers like Vanguard to stop buying fossil fuel bonds. Next slide. So if we look at the Mountain Valley Pipeline, as you'll have seen in earlier slides, EQT Corporation isn't the only company that's involved here, but it is the company that our report focused on. But this is kind of the flow of capital that we're seeing here. Your savings, your retirement savings, neighbors' retirement savings are being put in these accounts that are often managed by asset managers. Asset managers are then deciding what stocks to buy, what bonds to buy, and sometimes they're buying bonds from EQT, which is the biggest client of the Mountain Valley Pipeline. They've bought rights to roughly 2/3 of the pipeline's capacity. When it's running, they'll send 1.2 billion cubic feet of methane gas through it every day. And so there are a lot of ways in which this pipeline is kind of a justification for EQT to keep fracking and to like find markets for its fracking. Right, and then this money is going to MVP through those client relationships. So there are ways in which through this pathway that our savings are being used to prop up and fund things like the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Next slide. So our report was looking at just 5 US asset managers, those that I listed earlier: Vanguard, BlackRock, Invesco, JP Morgan Asset Management, and State Street. And we were looking at bond purchases over a 17-month period from the beginning of January to May of 2023. So this is less than a year and a half. And in that time, tens of millions of dollars flowed from just these 5 asset managers to EQT Corporation. That has nothing to do with the amount of money that flowed to any of the other companies that are involved in the Mountain Valley Pipeline, so Equitrans or others. And this is just a snapshot of a small period of time. So imagine the amount of money that they've been given in the 9 months since then and in the years before then. This is an ongoing problem. This money continues to flow unless we call on them to stop it. Next slide, please. So, like I said, we really need to cut off this flow of financing from asset managers like Vanguard, which is one of the biggest contributors to EQT bonds. And we need to get them to stop financing the Mountain Valley Pipeline, need them to stop giving money and buying new bonds from companies like EQT Corporation. But we also need to get them to stop buying bonds in other fossil fuel companies that are building destructive projects elsewhere, things like the natural gas build out in the Gulf South, deep water drilling, things like the Willow Project. All of these are going forward because they are getting financing and funding that they need from asset managers in order to make these projects go forward. So it's time to hold these asset managers accountable for the ways in which they are using our money for projects that do not benefit our futures, and really need to call on them to stop buying fossil fuel bonds. And so really excited to have you all in this fight, and to see how we're going to hold Wall Street and these financiers accountable for the role that they're playing in destroying our climate and destroying our communities. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jesse, for succinctly summarizing the ways that Vanguard and other asset managers are funding the Mountain Valley Pipeline, whether they admit that that's what they're funding or not. This is really how they're using their clients' money. And as you guys can see on this slide that's up here, there's a link. Sierra Club has a petition right now that you can sign, regardless of if you are a client of an asset manager or have any money invested at all. You can still sign the petition to encourage asset managers to take action on climate. And it's important to say also that in this conversation of taking action on climate, this also goes hand in hand with adopting policies that are climate related, but are also related to Indigenous rights. And so there's also a need to pressure these asset managers and banks and other financial institutions to not just make it a very general statement about taking action on climate, but really getting comprehensive about climate, the ways that they're investing in different companies, but then also policies that are geared towards protecting Indigenous rights, because as we know, the free, prior, informed consent is not something that is always respected and abided by. And so it becomes an opportunity for us to pressure these institutions to take responsibility and say, we're going to take it upon ourselves to implement policies that will also respect and protect traditional Indigenous land and the voices of the people that live on those lands. So it's important for us to get into that subject as well. And so it wasn't part of the presentation, but something that's really important that we talk about as well, because same as I said before, both frontline communities as a whole matter, as well as who are the people that make up those different communities and what are the stories that they have to tell. I'm going to go to our next slide. These are a couple of links for those of you who want to explore some more. The Vanguard SOS website, this is our main website. But then this first link here is another blog that was written by another frontline community member named Irene Leach. And so I want to invite you to, if you just go to vanguardsos.com, you can just look at our news thing if you don't feel like writing down this entire website that I have on this slide here, because I know it's a lot. And that will lead you also to an action page, which is the second link here. Because part of what we're hoping to build together with Power, 7 Directions of Service, Green Faith, Equate, many groups that are participating in wanting to apply pressure to asset managers is what are all the different ways that we come to the table? What are all the gifts that we all have to offer? Some of us are really gifted in the world of finance and being able to speak that language. Some of us are really gifted in direct action and being able to show up and lock down And some of us are really good at creating beautiful art and posters and prints, and all of those things are necessary and welcome in this fight for our planet and our futures. And so we're going to be having a running toolkit on this website, on the Vanguard SOS page, where we'll be sharing regularly graphics that, for those of you who have ever been to Power's Instagram page, they have a really wonderful social media presence. And so in that same style of educating folks on what's happening, but then also feeding in how this is tied to Vanguard, and inviting folks to regularly come and be like, what do I want to share on my social media today? I think it's going to be this graphic, and you can download it. We'll have captions and messaging to support you if you aren't sure what you want to write. And for those of you who have ever learned a language on Duolingo, there's like this streak that happens if you do your lessons every single day. You have a daily streak. And so we'll have a counter on that website that counts every day how many folks come to the website to pick a graphic. And then it zeroes out at the end of the day. And it's more for you to know, like, this is my 50th day of participating in my streak to be a part of pressuring Vanguard to stop investing in companies that are funding the Mountain Valley Pipeline. Within that also, there's lots of room for ideas. So if this is also exciting to you guys and you're like, I want to be a part of this, please feel free to reach out. Everybody's ideas are super welcome. I want to share that also on that action page is the same link for the Sierra Club petition. And so regularly checking in on there is where you can get updates. And a lot of those will lead you back to Power's page and to 7 Directions of Service, because this is part of the way that we live in the ecosystem together, is being able to share what our neighbors are doing and build strength in that way, which is super exciting to get to be a part of. I'm excited for this pressure on Vanguard to be able to pressure them to take action in the storytelling of the people facing the Mountain Valley Pipeline. It's also an opportunity for folks who aren't on the front lines and are really feeling like, how can I be involved in this? I feel very moved, and what do I do? Because sometimes it's hard to have a win. Sometimes we go a long time without a win. And so it's really special when you feel like you're a part of something. And so that's also the intention behind the digital toolkit, is for folks who aren't local, or maybe can't leave their house or can't be in the streets, but still want to be a part of that fight, to give everybody an opportunity and a way to participate. And then there will also be some in-person stuff that's happening too. That's still kind of coming together right now. But I know that we're plotting in May that there's going to be an action. And Denali, I don't know if you want to share anything more about that. I'm happy to. Oh, okay. So in early May, we're going to be having an event that if you stay tuned to everybody's websites, you'll be able to learn how you can participate in that event that's happening. And it's going to be just a great time. It's already been really beautiful to witness, and I'm excited for us to be able to be a part of it. So that being said, I know that there are some questions in the chat, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pull up the questions here. Oh, Denali, thank you. I see that you answered some of these. I think you've answered all of these, except, let's see. What's the status of MVP in the courts? I know jurisdiction was switched from the 4th Circuit to the DC Circuit. Can the DC Circuit stop MVP? Does anybody want to take that?
I can take it, and I just answered the questions that were like, what does power stand for? Because we might as well type that out. So the legal challenges history of MVP is really just a remarkable testament to lawyers that are extremely passionate about the environment, and communities being able to advocate for the energy sources and infrastructure that goes across their land. We're so grateful for the lawyers that have fought beside us to stop the MVP. And we all, including the lawyers, faced a really devastating loss when Senator Manchin forced Congress to fast track the pipeline in June of 2023. And following that, the U.S. Supreme Court paved the way for MVP to carry on despite multiple stays in construction. And so that did cut off a lot of our legal mechanisms for challenging the pipeline. Of course, lawyers are brilliant people and never say never. So I know there are brilliant minds that are thinking through how we can stop this project. But I also know that there's a case of 6 Southwestern Virginian landowners that's going through the court right now. The Supreme Court just issued one decision on it, and in the news, their lawyer Mia Yugo has said that they're going to keep fighting. So that's one court case to keep an eye out for, which regularly gets coverage in the news.
Thanks, Denali, and thank you, Nora, for that question. The last question that I see on here is from Rob, who's asking, would ESG funds be able to buy fossil fuel bonds? Jesse, do you have an answer for that?
Sure. The unfortunate answer is that ESG funds can buy fossil fuel bonds. This is a bigger problem with ESG and marketing. And there are rules right now that we're waiting to come out in the next few weeks from the Securities and Exchange Commission, so the federal agency that is designated with protecting investors. That's going to be ruling more on the kind of marketing and making it more clear to individual investors what each funds have. If you're interested in like more wonky answers, happy to, but the short answer is, unfortunately, if you're looking to invest fossil fuel free, there are resources that you can look to. There are things like fossil fuel free funds if you Google, where you can find those, but unfortunately, kind of as a category, ESG funds are technically able to invest in fossil fuel companies, including their bonds.
Thank you, Jesse. Just get the list of things that we have to put pressure on just continues to grow. I see that Sydney Pitcher has raised their hand, and I'm going to click view, but I've never done that in a webinar, so I'm not sure exactly what it will lead to. Yes, I'm going to let you speak and ask your question. Go ahead, Sydney.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Cool.
So I've been trying to listen and concentrate and stuff. And yeah, I agree that the MVP is definitely a big issue. I'm extremely worried about it, as well as the LNG CP2, the liquefied natural gas. And I think one productive way that we can pressure asset managers like Vanguard and JP Morgan Chase and whoever else, BlackRock, I think one way that we can help persuade them and pressure them and to stop funding these toxic climate bombs, I should say, is so I heard that there's evidence to prove that these projects are not needed, and that sounds like this could be a stranded asset, and like the demand for this kind of dirty energy is going down. And I think if we can show them that proof and provide them with other alternatives that they can invest in big money that are like clean energy and environmental projects, that, you know, if the issue is that they're going to make money, then I feel that there's a way that they can invest in new projects that, you know, are in more of higher demand that the general public wants. So I think maybe like I'm actually going to at some point try to call Vanguard and try to speak to someone, and as a concerned citizen, pressure them to stop funding these projects and explain why. Maybe that's something we can all do. We can all try to find the phone number to call Vanguard and BlackRock or whoever else, and just pressure them to stop funding these. But if we provide them with some insight and some proof that hey, this is not needed because of X, Y, and Z. And these are the kind of energies that are cleaner that more people will want. This would be a better investment and you'll make more money off of this. I feel like maybe they could be more receptive to that.
Thank you, Sydney. Yes, we have had a variety of different ways of trying to engage with Vanguard, and including there's a report coming out. I couldn't give you an exact date, but it's imminent that it's coming out, that's going to show like if folks had invested in non-fossil fuel, my brain just stopped working. If folks who were investing in non-fossil fuel, oh, my brain just stopped working. I'm so sorry. If they weren't investing in fossil fuels, there we go. How much more money they might have made. And so please keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye on our pages, because once that comes out, like we'll be sharing that for folks to be able to learn about. But also we've had, at least with Vanguard SOS, we've had multiple actions where folks are invited to call into Vanguard. They're invited to email into Vanguard. We're going to continue doing that. We're going to think about doing postcards that people can fill out and sign and send in with information. But that's also part of the intention of this this collaboration and working together with the Power Coalition and 7 Directions of Service, is to be able to uplift the impacts and in line with the financial information. So it's making us stronger by working all together instead
What
of
website? What website again is all this going to be on? Is this going to be on the Vanguard SOS website that you showed on the screenshot?
Yep, that's the one.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for bringing that to the table. I appreciate your thoughts. I think that we're all out. There's some love in the chat for Equate and Eileen Flanagan, who used to be with Equate, and yes, we love Eileen so much. I want to just express again my gratitude and appreciation to all of our speakers, Denali, Kelly, Dr. Crystal, and Jesse. Thank you so much for taking time out of your evenings and early evenings and just time off to come and share with folks the story of your communities and why it's really important for people to know what's happening and be empowered and impassioned to be a part of all of this, and also translating from finance language into a language that some of us who aren't great at finance can understand, because that can be intimidating sometimes. So if we're all working on this together, it's a little bit easier. So thank you very much. And thank you so much to everybody who has attended this webinar tonight, and also for taking time out of your evenings to care about the resistance that's happening to the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and fighting for our communities and our planet and our futures and all the future generations of everyone. Really thankful. This recording is going to be posted on a public YouTube for the Vanguard SOS campaign, and we'll send out information to that once that's up. So if you missed it, or you know somebody who might want to watch it, they're able to also access this information. And yeah, I hope that everybody has a really wonderful evening, and we'll see each other in the streets or the digital streets. I hope you have a great evening. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.